For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Thabi Madiba, researcher and analyst. Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss Nelson Mandela's obstinacy, Nelson Mandela's leadership part 2. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
In what way was Nelson Mandela notoriously stubborn?
Well, I give examples in the article, but it was well known that when he'd made up his mind about something, it was very hard to move him. And very often he had a good reason for being stubborn. He recognized, he could see that if we continue doing this or if we change to doing that, then we are going to have a breakthrough. So he wanted to stick by what was a way of achieving gains for the liberation movement. But sometimes he would be stubborn about things which were not good. For example, I give the example there that when the security said to him in KwaZulu-Natal he couldn't go in because they've got intelligence reports which say there's a danger, and he said, I'm going, and he could be stubborn like that. And they had to find ways of stopping him, and the way to stop him was to call Sisulu to intervene. So, but I mean, in my dealings with him, when I worked with him, it's a long time ago, it wasn't sort of obvious in everyday communications, but sometimes he'd be very clear. This is the way he wants to do it, and it would take a lot of persuasion if he was wrong,
So was it through his obstinacy that he was elected the first democratic president?
No, I don't think obstinacy had anything to do with that. I don't think he was obstinately ambitious. I don't think he was obstinately seeking to be president. Obstinacy, in the one sense, I use it in two senses, which I get from dictionaries. One means stubbornness, the other means steadfastness, sticking by certain ideas and principles. Sticking by the commitment to freedom is why Mandela became democratic president, because people recognized him as being a preeminent representative of the struggle. And he calls his one book, The Struggle is My Life. And people recognized there was nothing that Mandela did for himself personally. So he wasn't aiming to be president so much as that everyone recognized that he was the leader, and they wanted to make way and ensure. So no one contested that. Tambo had become ill. I mean, he would probably have deferred to Tambo, but Tambo had become ill.
And in your column, you stated that Mandela saw the possibility of breaking the logjam and securing peace and freedom. So do you think it was wrong for him to act without consent of the leadership collectively?
You see, we were taught that you don't act on your own. This is in the ANC, in the Communist Party, that you act collectively, that before you do something that affects the organization, you have to have the consent of others, then you account back to them on why you couldn't do this or why you did that. And he consciously set out to initiate talks with the apartheid regime, and he says he did it on his own, specifically because he knew they would stop him if he had tried. And that, on the face of it, is wrong. But if you consider the delicate nature of the situation that he was trying to set in motion, if you want to get negotiations going, you can't do that in a stadium. You actually have to have semi-secret talks, because neither side wants the public to know that they are talking. So that Mandela saw that there was a logjam, and he saw a logjam that could not be broken by a Congress holding resolutions. It needed him to act on his own. At the time, I was not so happy about it, but in retrospect, I recognize that sometimes leadership is actually acting on your own and not collectively, and that has been vindicated historically.
And do you think it was and is still right for individuals to criticize Mandela for the role that he played in securing freedom for the oppressed?
No, but everyone has got it right. I think that there's, it is good to have constructive, well-informed criticism of Mandela, debating of his legacies in the plural. We shouldn't all be celebrating him as a godlike figure. However, some of the comments, criticisms are very ill-informed, and I think people have not done their homework. And I believe that just as we owe it to Mandela not to treat him as, and call him an icon and great and all of that, and we need to unpack the qualities that he had, just as I believe that that is important. I think it mustn't be done carelessly, it mustn't be done in a generalized, ill-informed way. Unfortunately, some of the things that are happening now, as referring to him as a sellout and all of that, you can argue that, but argument is different from just throwing out insults without arguing them. And I don't think that many of the criticisms have been well advanced as arguments, and the idea of debating his legacies is very important. That's what I'm trying to do in this series.
And lastly, upon being released from prison, Mandela was very clear that he had to work in a manner that made the peace, even if it required compromises and symbolic gestures to supporters of apartheid. So do you think Mandela was the greatest leader?
Well, you know, I don't want to say who's the greatest and things like that. He was a very great leader in the sense that he read the signs of the times. He was able to see what was needed at this time, and he was prepared to do it even if it was distasteful to him. If securing the peace required him to make gestures to de Klerk, which he found distasteful at times, he did that because securing the peace was very important. For me, a great leader is someone who is prepared not only to make resounding speeches at a stadium, but a person who is prepared to move in more than one direction as is required to secure the goals of freedom and peace. Now, Mandela was prepared to make compromises. Mandela was prepared to meet Betsy Verwoerd. He was prepared to do a whole lot of things that would not have been pleasant for him, but he wasn't concerned about himself so much as the country. So that's why I think he was a giant of a leader, but he had his faults, but his greatness overweighed those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about Nelson Mandela's obstinacy, Mandela's Leadership Part 2.